So we're going to make a double batch of the chicken pot pie. We're going to start with our chicken legs because they're just easier to cook if they're shredded, or shred them after they've been cooked. So we just have set these in the fridge overnight, and they're not thawed, they're still pretty frozen. It's the morning of when we're going to cook them. So we'll take them out. And set them right into our crock pot. Be about the right amount for the recipe that we sent out, and we'll just turn that on low, maybe add a little bit of water to it, and leave it sit for the rest of the day.
Okay, so we are making the chicken pot pie recipe, doing some prep work with the vegetables. One thing we really recommend is getting a sticky cabinet liner. You can get at Target or Costco or online or whatever. Just the stuff you put in your cabinet counters. That helps the cutting board stick to the surface, so it's much easier and safer to cut with. If you don't have that, you can just get a wet towel. That's kind of what restaurants typically use. The other really important thing is a sharp knife. If your knife is not really sharp, then you should get a new one, or sharpen it. We can go through some of that later. Give us a call if you want some advice. So we've got some carrots that have been peeled, garlic cloves, a couple potatoes, and an onion, and some rosemary. So we're going to go through cutting those. So, really pretty basic. We're just going to chop the carrot off. It's already been peeled, so we'll take the end off and go like that. We're looking for relatively small pieces, so this is about the right maybe diameter. Maybe we'll just cut them in half because it's easier to move when it's not going around. But with the point down, cut it down like that. We got it flat, so then we can go cut through. The knife stays in the same place, and we just can cut through, push the carrot forward without cutting our hands off. You there, carrot? Purple carrots, get them from the farmer's market. You can see I end up always moving my knife, and everybody will tell you that's not the right way to go because you accidentally cut your fingers off. Garlic cloves. So we have these 2 garlic cloves. They have the ends on them, so I'm just going to cut the base end off. And then the best way to peel them, if you spend all this time peeling them, they'll just get stuck to your fingers and it's really frustrating. But if you take the flat end of your knife and bang on them, then you'll see they come out really nice and easily. This one's got a little bit of it inside that is less appealing, so I always like to clean that up first. And then now that it's already smashed a little bit, it's much easier to mince too. So I'm going to just cut it this long way and then roughly turn it and cut it back the other way. With the onion, similar tips. Cut the end off, cut the other end off. I like to cut it in half then, so it's easier to peel. That peel just came right off, and this one came right off. So it's a little bit difficult to show with this small of an onion, but I like to still cut at an angle. Like this. When I'm halfway up, I'll often flip it back up so I have a nice flat even surface. Cut like that. And then we can cut it the other direction. None of this has to be really precise since you're just putting it in a chicken pot pie anyway. Big thing is don't get too worried about if it's perfect. potatoes, I like to cut in half so they're nice, again, flat surface. Rosemary is pretty slick because you can grab on the top and just pull back. Not too hard, not too soft, and you'll end up with most of the leaves just taken off the stem. A little bit of the stem won't hurt you either. And then just a nice little chop. All of the ingredients in the recipe list are really approximate. We've kind of just took some liberties with stuff we've got around that we thought would look good, or taste good. We didn't have any mushrooms, so we didn't include those. We didn't have any shallots. We put a little bit of extra red onions. You know, whatever we think might just taste good. It's a pot pie. So I'll add these to the rest of the stuff that we've already got cut. And if it's about the right amount, it's about the right amount. If it's different, it's different. No big deal. A package of drumsticks, actually 2 because we're doing a double batch for the chicken pot pie recipe. The original recipe, if you recall, mentioned in the newsletter, called for chicken breasts and a separate package of chicken broth, both of which are really expensive cuts of chicken, both the broth and the chicken breast. And chicken breasts don't really have anywhere near as much flavor as drumsticks do or thighs. So what we're going for with the pot pie is to get lots of chicken flavor into the pot pie with all the other vegetables we had just cut. So legs are perfect for that. So we look at this, it's been in the crock pot now on low for 9 hours or so. We took it out again the night before and put it in the fridge to just begin to thaw, and then on low from, we had it this morning from 8 o'clock till 5, but it probably would have been a little bit better to even start earlier, 7 or 6:30. So we're going to take these out. You'll see all of that good broth we've got in there. It'll be great to use lots of good flavor, lots of good bone broth. Probably tastes way better than if you had purchased broth in the store. We need about 4 cups of it, so we probably will have to dilute it. This looks like it's about the right consistency. All this meat will come right off the bones. So we're going to take these out, just let them cool on the cutting board. You could also put it into a different bowl of some sort. We happen to have the cutting board out, so I thought it would be just easy to set them here. Okay, so we got most of that out. What we're going to do is let this cool. It's steaming up. I don't really want to put my hands on it right now, but we are going to take the broth out of here and put it into this metal bowl. This one's really nice because it has some measuring so we can see how much liquid's in there, and it has a nice little pour spout, makes it really convenient. There's obviously a lot of extra stuff that's going to fall out of here, some extra meat we could pick through, but right now we're just going to get this out of the crock pot, let it cool, and we'll filter that later before it goes into our pot pie. So once this cools, we'll come back and pull the... It's cooled down enough to handle it. It's only been maybe 5 minutes. We've got this fine mesh strainer, which you don't have to use one that's quite this fine. A regular colander would work, but it's pretty nice because you don't get any extra stuff in your broth that you may not want. So we'll just take this, pour it in. And I'll probably go through that, to get the extra meat out of it. Most of that's actually meat that had already fallen off the bone. So we're short for this double batch, we've got about 2 cups, so we need to probably add, another 2 cups to it to get to a double batch, which is probably what we'd expect. Right now it's really strong broth, so if you just add the extra water, you'll have about right for what the recipe calls for. I'm going to just set that off to the side. And we can use this bowl then again for separating the meat and the bones. So you can see, this just fell right off when I pulled it out, so that's pretty easy. Pretty much just want to pick it up, go there. What I like to do, if I'm have free time and kind of prep ahead, I'll take a chicken like this, chicken legs, chicken wings, or whole chicken, or pork roast or beef roast or anything, and basically run it in the crock pot and shred all of the meat like I'm doing, and then add back all of the broth. and you can freeze that into small containers. So you got, you know, a serving size or a small amount of chicken or pulled pork that could be used in a sandwich meat or just added to any recipe. So this is a great way to have boneless, skinless meat that really tastes good because it's stewed in its bone broth all day. Way better than using boneless, skinless chicken breasts. So we'll just finish pulling these off. Probably will take, you know, a few minutes to finish for a single batch. Should not too long. Okay, so chicken pulled. It took about 5 minutes for a single batch, so it was pretty quick. And the added benefit is your hands are super nice and moisturized from all of that great chicken fat that was on there. So we have got a pan warming up. We're going to make a roux, which is a beginning part of any gravy. So, but the cool thing about this recipe is it starts off with the onions in the butter as a base for the roux. So normally a straight roux would just be the butter and the flour, but this step is kind of fun. So, you know, it calls for whatever, a half a stick of butter or something like that in the recipe. I'm just making it up. You do want to have enough fat with the butter to make sure we cover up the flour. That's what's going to make the pot pie gravy stick together. So this is kind of key for the science of it all. While this melts down, we probably have enough butter in there I can add the shallots, and I guess these are onions, but whatever you end up with, it's a similar thing, and the garlic. When I was chopping them, I didn't keep them separate just for the demonstration, but we already have these cut up separate. So you want to definitely keep the vegetables and the onions separate when you're doing it yourself. So, if you didn't have a crock pot, you could have made pulled chicken or pulled pork like we were talking in a pot like this in the oven. You'd want to have it covered, make sure you probably had a little extra water, and run the oven at 175 degrees, maybe 180 degrees, instead of the crock pot on low. It definitely works better in a crock pot. If you don't have one, it's a good investment. It makes cooking a lot easier and faster, and everything tastes a lot better. So, but you can definitely get away with a pot like this in the oven. Probably for the amount of drumsticks we had, you'd want a smaller one. Just the more compact and the more moisture that area is, the better. So we're going to let these just kind of saute around. The heat is maybe a little bit hot for what we're doing, maybe about right, where it's still you know, simmering in there a little bit. The butter is melting. So we're going to let these go for a little while until they soften, and then we'll come back and add the flour. Okay, so this butter has all melted down. Been simmering like this just for a few minutes. Everything looks like it's starting to soften. Really all we're trying to do is infuse the butter with the garlic and the shallot flavor so that it goes throughout the dish. So we're going to add the flour to this, and again the goal is to coat all of the flour granulars with some sort of a fat, in this case the butter. That protects the gluten proteins in the flour to prevent them from unraveling too soon and when we add the broth in. So that's basically how you make gravy. If you were gluten free, you could do a similar thing. You would just want to use some cornstarch instead of flour, and maybe experiment a bit with that. The ratios and the amounts would be a little different. So we're just going to add that in, try to get everything mixed up as best we can. With a roux, if you were making it for a roast, so like if you had done the same exact thing, but you weren't making a pot pie, you just kind of wanted chicken engraving sandwiches, you would do this without the shallots and garlic, although it would be nice. And then you'd end up with a paste like this. It's kind of like a butter paper mache, and you can let it cook and brown here. So without the shallots and the garlic, this would all be white right now instead of kind of this brown color. And you would just keep mashing it around on the pan. If you ran out of liquid, if it was too dry, you just add some more butter in, or you could use lard or some other sort of fat. Coconut oil probably would work. And you just make a roux. So you can make all this and it'll end up and go golden brown. The longer that you cook it for, the less it's going to have the power to thicken up the gravy per ounce. So a real white one is going to have a lot of thickening power. A darker one is going to have less, but it's going to have a lot more intense and complex flavor from the browning and the caramelizing process of the flour.
So this looks like it's pretty well coated. We're just doing a quick roux. The goal here is to thicken it up, not to create a whole bunch of flavor. So we got everything coated. I don't see any plain flour there. So we will add our broth from the crock pot. We've filled it up to about 4 cups, and we're just going to start adding it in and stir it as we go. I think I'll switch to a whisk. Might be a little easier to just break things up. We've got one of these whisks here with a little ball. You can really use whatever you want. So as we dissolve this now, the flour was protected, and the heat from the stove is going to come up. The gluten molecules will be able to unwind, but in a timely order, and that will thicken up the mixture as it gets hotter. So we'll turn the heat up on the stove. In order for this to work, you really do need a decent amount of fat in your broth. What's happening is the gluten is unwinding and capturing the fat molecules and creating that thick gelatin-type material, I guess, that you have for gravy. So that's what we're trying to do here. If you go with a low-fat option or you skim the fat off the top, it's really not going to thicken up for you. Plus, that fat is super healthy with all the pasture-raised chicken, so it should be heart-healthy and be good for you. So may as well enjoy it. You can see this is thickening up a little bit already. If we wanted it thicker, we could make some more roux. This looks like a good consistency, but I'm going to let it get a little hotter, see where it comes up to. You could do this with biscuits and gravy. It'd be a great way to make some biscuits in the morning. Make a gravy just like this, real quick and easy. Especially if you had some chuck roast or something you made the night before in the crock pot, you can make a real quick gravy like this. And that is really coming together nice. It's good when a plan works out, huh? Okay, I think that's good. We'll let that just simmer for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and add the vegetables. Turn it down so it's not too much. For a minute, enough time for me to go grab the vegetables and the salt and the pepper that we need. So I'm just going to take and dump these vegetables in. Maybe I'll switch back to my spoon. I got this really turned down on low. It's on a super low burner now. We don't really want to be scalding the bottom of the pan. That's not good eats. So get that stirred up a little bit. It calls for however much salt that it does in the recipe, half teaspoon or something, but I don't really like salt, so I'm just going to put how much I want in. It's a lot easier if you don't measure things, cooking is. Sometimes you'll screw it up and there'll be not enough salt, then you can add more. It's a lot easier to start with not enough and add more than to take it out. So if you're experimenting, maybe err on that side. Pepper looks good, just grind it right in. Really makes a difference to have a fresh ground pepper in everything. Man, it smells good. I think the rosemary was also chopped up in those vegetables, so if you were confused, that goes in there. Looks like enough pepper. We can always add some at the dinner table if we want. I kind of keep stirring this. It is really thick, so I don't want to make sure it doesn't burn. Recipe calls, I think, for it to kind of simmer for 5 minutes or so to let everything meld. Most of these vegetables are going to do their cooking in the oven itself, but we'll let it go for a couple of minutes, stirring to prevent it from scalding on the bottom. So this will be ready to add the chicken that we pulled. So it's about the right amount, give or take. Again, we're making a double batch, which is really nice for this kind of stuff because it takes a lot of steps, but it freezes really well. And especially with the baby coming, we really don't want to be cooking so much in February and March, so we're trying to stockpile everything we make as a double batch, and we just put it in the freezer. So this is a perfect dish for that. Here's some peas we throw in. All of a sudden, we've got a lot of food. So we'll just mix these in, and I think we'll be ready after a couple minutes to put it all together.
So I'm taking over for Jack. We have our pan. The pan was buttered ahead of time, and I just put the chicken's been cooking in there a little bit in there, so that's ready to go. I have a really lightly floured work surface. So not a lot on there. We don't want to get a lot of flour on the dough, but just enough so it doesn't stick to the countertop. Now the recipe calls for puff pastry, and I'm actually using phyllo dough for a couple reasons. One, it's what we had in the house. Two, it tastes good. Three, it's not the same thing. Puff pastry is a different type of pastry, and it's layered with butter. So you have a really thin layer of pastry, and then you have a layered butter, and then pastry and butter and pastry and butter. The phyllo dough is a different dough, and it doesn't have the butter in between the layers. So you have these dry layers of dough with the phyllo. I'm adding butter to it before I put it on there so that you do get some of the butteriness of the puff pastry. You don't have the same end result because it's not the same product, but it is delicious, and it's probably a third the price too, so there's that added bonus. So what I'm doing with these sheets is putting butter on about half the sheet. I'm using an 11 by 17 pan, which is the size of a half sheet. So these are sticking together a little bit. These are leftover sheets from an earlier batch, so they're a little drier than the first time you would use them. But I'm going to fold each sheet in half and then carefully peel it apart from the rest and put it on top there. Then I'm going to butter the top of this one again so that between each layer of dough I'll have some butter. Now make sure whether you're using phyllo dough or you're using puff pastry, you're really careful to follow the directions for thawing it ahead of time. With a phyllo dough, you have to have it in the fridge for a good 7 or 8 hours, and then you have to have it on the counter for a couple hours. So if you just pull it out of the freezer right before you're going to cook, you're going to have problems. And it unfortunately doesn't thaw well if you don't do it according to directions. So it does take a little bit of advance notice to make sure you get that right. So I'm just going to keep layering layers of pastry like this until I use about half of a package. This is a 16-ounce package, and I use half for each recipe that I make. So we'll keep doing that, stacking layer on top of layer, and then it can go right in the oven.
Our pastry is ready to go, and again, if you had bought the puff pastry, you would not have had to do all of that buttering and layering. You would just take it out and put it right on top. So I'll put this in the 400-degree oven, and then we'll get all the rest of this cleaned up, put into our freezer container to have it ready for next time. The kitchen smells amazing, so let's see if it's done. Alright, so we look and it is bubbling up on the side, so we believe the vegetables should all be cooked and tender, and the top looks golden brown, so I say we take it out and let it cool. You definitely don't want to eat it right away. I made that mistake the first time Betsy made this, and it kind of burnt my tongue. So let it sit here for a few minutes. You could, if you're really in a rush, you could take a piece off and let it sit on a plate, and should be good to go. Enjoy.